because it allows me to have a little more creative freedom over what I do and how I do things. Sorry, I just told me I wasn't going to be recorded if I was spotlighted. I'm not sure what that means. Anyways, yeah, so I got into game development pretty early on. I realized that I loved seeing what game developers were doing more than the gamers who were playing the game because they had such an interesting viewpoint of video games and the games that they made. Um, and so I started off with learning Blender, which, as you know, is kind of a difficult program to learn, especially for middle schoolers. So it took a long freaking time to, um, do anything in for a while. But I'd actually really recommend it if you ever are interested in game art or just 3D art in general. So anyway, hi to all the new people. By the way, this could be sort of a chill talk. If anyone like wants to ask a question in the middle, like halfway in, uh, you can, I don't care at all. In fact, I encourage it. Anyway, so I made this talk about sort of these more higher level abstract parts of game development because, sorry, is my camera out of focus? Yeah, it does it. Anyways, I'm going to talk about some of the more abstract parts of game development because um, you can find a lot about the more specifics, right? How to use Unity, how to use Unreal, how to use Game Maker. But I think uh, in like game development is sort of it's a very complicated activity. And sometimes you get lost in those little details, right? And I think that having some concepts and ideas that are sort of overarching about making games and about how you feel about making games when you make them and how you approach making them that are very valuable and took me a long time to find out. I'm actually a lot of these things I'm about to tell you, I sort of learned the hard way. Um, I sort of wanted this talk to be called uh, what was it? It was like um, effective tips for game development from someone who learned it the hard way or something like that. Anyways, um, yeah, so let's just start out with some general advice, right? And this is the one that I really messed up. Like this one that I'm about to tell you, this advice I totally did not follow for a long time because I thought I was special, right? I thought that, you know, oh yeah, whatever, don't do something big. Well, I have big ideas and I want to do them anyways. So um, I sort of knew that going in, but I was in school and I didn't feel like I had to make anything that was concrete or shippable because I had other things that I had to do that I knew I had to finish, right? Like schoolwork. Um, so yeah, well, let's get into it. Actually, first, let's go into a little terminology. I'm going to talk about game mechanics a lot, all right? Game mechanics are what make games different from movies, TV, music, any sort of media. A game mechanic is a consistent, defined way of interacting with a game. So that could be selecting something in a menu. It could be aiming down the sights of a gun with the right mouse button. It could be attacking with your sword with the X button, right? It usually has an action that the player starts to understand as they can do this thing and consistently it should work the same way. Um, and game mechanics are really important. I mean, even in the most I would say non-interactive games, there's still game mechanics in it, right? Like even a visual novel where you choose dialogue options or even just press a button to go to the next dialogue option. There's that interaction. It's like you're giving the player some sense of agency, right? Um, so yeah, let's go into some general advice. Make lots of small projects and try and finish them. I think this is the most important one. It's the hardest to do, all right? And okay, think of like the most basic game. you could ever make. Like just the most like smallest. I mean, still with features like I don't know, a scoreboard or even like uh, a few variables that the player can see. Right? It especially for maybe computer science people like you or information systems people. Um, you say, oh yeah, I could probably do that if I put my mind to it, and you probably could. The thing is, it's going to take you way longer than you think it will, um, because it just does. I mean, it's this crazy thing. You can pretty much picture any game in your mind and think how long you think it'll take you to make it, and then triple that. That's probably how long it'll take. But then once you get there, you'll probably still have more stuff to work on, right? Um, it's an art form, not a science. It's something that is hard to quantify. It's a little bit like software development, except in some ways software development on drugs because you have to deal with things that are less quantifiable, even less quantifiable than code, like art and interactions. Well, no, that's not if interactions in software. But so my biggest advice to you is if you want to start game development, just make some really small games. Make a bunch of them. Make them kind of funny or goofy. They don't have to be special, but get to know what it's like to go through all the stages of making a game. And it's if I hadn't like worked at a place where I made small VR demos for CES, I probably wouldn't even have that experience because um, I had to do it for work. And that's really the only reason that I feel even confident in making a game larger than just a small, I don't know. Um, I mean, I did make a whack-a-mole game for Professor Norman's, what was it, Python class.
Python.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They did not look like moles, though. They looked like
Nope.
little circles. I remember there was a way to cheese it and win pretty easily, but I think I patched it out before the end. Hopefully,
I don't remember. I have a
it's
question.
okay. You've got. Oh yeah, go for it.
Do you think it's useful to try to recreate games that you see online? Is that a useful activity?
That's tricky. It's iffy. If so, that's actually what I was about to talk about. Is the games that you typically see online, especially the big AAA ones, right? Those are made by hundreds, thousands of people, and you want to stray away from that. But playing other games to sort of know what is out there and what sort of things you could adopt into your own game is very important. So yes, making things that resemble the games that you play or have seen before is a good idea. But um, don't try and make your dream game unless it's like a really, really small game. Especially if it involves the term MMO. Uh, that's like a terrifying word even for the biggest game studios in the world. Uh, you'll never ever achieve that on your own. Especially like not without like a long list of titles under your belt. So, yeah, yes and no. Um,
Thanks.
yeah. And it's something. Another thing about making games, right, is like you have to want to make games, right? Uh, if you want to make a game that is anything other than like trivial, I think that you have to want to do it because it's such a big ordeal, and you want to make sure you're willing to put the work into it. I mean, it can be fun to mess around and make demos and things, but it's always going to be more work than you think it is. Okay, so yeah, my next piece of advice is find other game developers who inspire you, which includes looking at other games and seeing and recreating. There's actually a great Unity channel. I can't remember the name of it, but they recreate mechanics from other games, like the axe throwing in God of War. There's a bunch of other ones. I can't remember the name of it. Shoot, I wish I had put it in my. I actually almost thought about looking it up and putting it my resources document. But it, uh, it can be really good exercise of like figuring those kind of things out. Um, but yeah, finding other game developers who inspire you, ones who you sort of agree with, or you like the way that they do things. You like that can be hard, right? Because breaking into any community requires a lot of just snooping around, seeing what people say, finding the right outlets. Twitter's a big place for a lot of game developers. I think it's sort of that way in a lot of art focused roles. Um, I do have some suggestions because there are some really cool ones out there. So I'm a big fan of procedural generation, so I'm a little biased towards that. Procedural generation is creating things algorithmically, like game worlds. Um, so there's a guy named Oscar Stelberg. His Twitter account is OSKSTA. Um, and he makes these. He just made this game called Townscaper. Um, it's uh, it's like this little game slash experiment. It's not a full game necessarily, but it's something you can play around with, where you click on these different areas on a grid, and it will like sprout up a little building. But like, if you put two buildings in a row in the grid, they sort of merge into one, and you can make all these sort of complex structures that look like little islands, little town islands. It's beautiful. It's amazing. He's like the darling of the procedural generation community. Um, there's a guy named Dennis Gustafsson. He made there was a phone game where you're like going down a corridor and there's a bunch of like glass shards everywhere that you have to hit with metal balls. I know you guys have all played that. I forgot what it's called. He made that and it looks beautiful even on really old devices. But right now he's working on a game called Teardown. Teardown is it's a game where there are all these like destructible environments, and he basically makes it run on like mid-range GPUs, but it has ray tracing and it's voxel based. It's like nothing I've ever seen before in a game, and you don't have to have RTX for it. It's got amazing like full-on smoke simulations. It's beautiful and it looks so fun to play. Um, you sort of have to use the destructibility of the environment to solve puzzles. And then the last one, his name is Matthew Lyons, and he makes these amazing illustrated scenes that I think he's making a game with. That's another one that's so unique that I've never seen before. I should probably put some of these links in the chat so you can check it out. Because even I get bored of staring at my own face. Oh, I didn't see there was chats. Oh, right, okay.
I don't know what procedural, I can't say it, that thing. Procedural.
Procedural generation.
Yeah, I don't know what that is, sorry.
Yeah, so procedural generation is, so it's an algorithmic recreation of, typically a world. Here, give me one sec. My girlfriend just got here. What's up?
Hi, I just didn't.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I left some jelly beans upstairs for her. She just got her second shot for the COVID vaccine. So procedural generation, I'm like a huge nerd on procedural generation. So if anyone has like questions at the end, I could talk hours and hours and hours about it. But so right, you use an algorithm to make an environment. Minecraft has procedural generation, right? It's like an infinite world that continues on, and it's like generated in chunks. Typically you use randomization. So like any roguelike, there's this genre called roguelikes in there's a video game genre called roguelikes where you go into a procedurally generated dungeon. It's a randomized dungeon that's different every time, and you have to work your way through it without dying, and you gotta like fight monsters and stuff. It's very like tabletop role-playing kind of style. But yeah, so in fact, I'll talk a little bit about my own procedural experiments near the end when I talk about some of the projects I've worked on. I made a procedurally generated city procedural city generator. But yeah, so yeah, those are some Twitter accounts you can check out while I'm talking. They're very cool. So yeah, play some other video games. Take note about you like them. All right, so I'm going into some more creative advice. Some ways that when you're thinking about what type of games to make, once you've had a few basic or simplistic titles under your belt, that really help. They help a lot. Um, in I mean, everyone has game ideas, and um, any game idea is good if you do it well. Oh yes, Jonathan Blow. Sorry, I was just mentioning the chat. He's like the original um, independent developer that everyone sort of knows from a famous documentary in the 2000s. He made a Braid. Anyways, so any game idea can be good if you do it right, I think. It's more about your implementation, which I will talk about in my third little section. But here's some creative advice. First of all, don't be afraid to borrow, right? Look at games that you played before, look at games that are out there. Because one thing that, I got a degree in studio art at Calvin, and one of the things I really learned a lot about is, art is derivative. Almost every single part of art has in some way either been done before or like it's based off of something else or it uses a technique that was made by somebody else. It's very similar to the scientific community where, Isaac Newton said like, um, I'm on the shoulders of a giant or whatever. So uh, yes, don't be afraid to borrow. Most game developers encourage this practice of adopting, improving new and old mechanics, right? So, I mean, Doom, right? There would be there you can't name a single modern like FPS game without acknowledging that Doom was sort of the reason that it exists, or at least the first stepping stone, right? Well, you could argue that a game like Castle Wolfenstein was first, but that's that doesn't matter. So, um, like game mechanics are almost never patented. Well, okay, so with some very few stupid exceptions, there there's something that should be improved upon and worked on and shared and developed. Um, and yeah, it's a very cool thing to even just look at someone else's game mechanic and implement it yourself. Okay, here's another really interesting thing that I've seen a lot in the game development community, which is experimenting with a self-imposed limitation, right? So a lot of game jams do this. Game jam is like it's like a hackathon for making video games specifically. Um, so basically, they give you a limitation that you have to work around, and what it does is it forces you to think creatively to solve a limitation. So, for example, like a platformer game without a dedicated jump button. Um, Zelda probably. You could make a horror game without a way to defend yourself. Well, that's sort of what Amnesia did. That's why it's so famous today. You could make a linear story game with no cutscenes. That's sort of what made Half-Life a big deal. A game where you have control over two characters at the same time, which Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons does excellently, by the way. It's a really cool game. You should check it out. You have to actually use two joysticks, one for each character, and you have to make them help each other over obstacles. It's quite interesting, and it's very clearly you can see the game design choices that went into it. Um, Sometimes these limitations are necessary to maintain the aforementioned simplicity, right? So, uh, like, oh, right, that wasn't aforementioned yet. Okay, so sometimes these limitations are necessary to not make your game huge, the MMO or things like that. Like feature creep is awful, which I'll talk about a little later. You have to give yourself limitations, like, okay, we're not gonna make this game go there because if we go there, then it's gonna take too much time, and um, it's not feasible for this title. Um, and then contemplate the ways that make your game different from others. Now, this is like some people make games for themselves for fun, and they don't want to show it to other people or sell it online. That's great. Um, I think a lot of game developers sort of have this dream of being rich and famous from the game they made, and now everyone loves them because they made something so amazingly awesome. Um, so, do it this way you will, but contemplate the ways that make your game different from others. Um, there's just so many games out there. If you look at like the number of games that release on, I think it's 10, an average of 10 games released on Steam every single day. Um, and like, if you want people to like find your game interesting or worth buying, it's got to have something like unique to it, right? Um, a really good way to demonstrate this, like, okay, genre films are really hard for directors to make, even the best ones, because let's see, what's a genre film? Like a western or a uh, what do you call the like a crime? I think like The Godfather. I can't even remember what genre that is. It's very clear. But because you have to, not a thriller. I'll think of it later. But you have to be really good at it, right? Because you have to make it so good that it's worth watching, even though you've watched a very similar film before. Okay. So if you want to make your game something that stands out or is um, I guess, noteworthy in some way, you have to think of, or even just contemplate why it is different from a different game. Um, like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes if you mix two genres, or add elements of one type of game to another, it can really make things super interesting, right? There's so many different genres and so many ways that you can mash them together. Like for example, Call of Duty added RPG elements to their multiplayer games, which had the unintended effect of making it highly addictive and very like it consumed people's time because they saw that they could level up. They could get a certain gun that they couldn't get before, but they had to, play the game in order to get it. That was a weird concept that hadn't really been um, really explored before. Uh, and if we're talking about smaller games, this isn't. You don't have to be a AAA game studio to do this. The guy who developed Crypt of the Necrodancer is really good at finding little niches that are underappreciated or like not covered. So there's he made Crypt of the Necrodancer. It's a dungeon crawling game where you have to make your way through these procedurally generated levels, fighting monsters, but it's rhythm based. So if you don't move to the beat or attack to the beat, like the action, they like can't do that. So you have to sort of be with the rhythm of the game while you're playing it, which was really awesome. And it got him like Nintendo got him they got him on the phone and they had him do a Zelda spin-off of Crypt of the Necrodancer, which is unheard of. Nobody's ever done that before. Nobody's ever had Nintendo call him up and be like, "Can we make a Nintendo like a version of your game for our celebrated IP?" It's crazy. Yeah, it's all about like originality. So sometimes a game can be unoriginal but have a unique theme. Themes can sort of add a lot of fun elements to your game. Okay, so for example, battle royale games are really popular right now. You get 100 people on a map and you have them all fight until one survives. They're all very military focused, right? Even Fortnite, which is very cartoony, you still have guns and people running around shooting them. Um, so Fall Guys got noticed because it's a battle royale game where you're these like cutesy mascots, right? That sort of push each other off of platforms. Like that was new. They were mixing up the theme. They were making it. They were reframing a similar game in a different light, and that's what made it like super. Like everyone was playing it for a while, but now it's completely gone. It actually totally fell off the face of the earth. It's kind of funny that it's called Fall Guys, but yeah, Plants versus Zombies, tower defense game, but there are no turrets, you got to grow the plants. And, instead of, instead of, waiting for them to be constructed, which is so frustrating, right? You're like, just, turn the hammers faster, whatever it takes to build these things. But, a plant grows and you just have to like wait for it to grow. That sort of, um, progression works really well. And it's interesting because like, plants using plants is, it just makes things feel different. Okay, so I'm going even more specific now to some design advice. Um, like I said, there's so many tools out there and they all work kind of differently. So I don't want to give information that's like too specific, because, I'm a Unity fan. So what I say about Unity might not apply to Unreal, things like that. Um, you guys are actually, computer science and information science people. You have a huge leg up in game development, right? Because you know how to program the stuff, right? You've seen a block of code before. It's not gonna scare you away. Um, it's actually like it makes everything so much easier. So I encourage you guys to try, especially like Unity or Godot. Godot engine is fairly new. It's open source. It's really starting to come into the limelight of indie development. Um, and it doesn't have blueprints like Unreal, which is kind of a godsend. Um, so here's some more general design advice, right? Simplicity is so important. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. Um, One polished mechanic in your game is just like infinitely better than like five really bad ones. Okay. Um, you If you have like one gun that's really fun to shoot, it's just it's gonna be more interesting than having five guns that feel like you're like shooting a Nerf gun that has no feedback and just has maybe different stats. Um, Actually, one really funny thing I learned, there was an old game, I forgot what it was called. Um, it was in the sort of the post-Quake era of new FPS competitive games. It was World War II themed. I think it was a Red Faction, the original Red Faction. And so the game developers actually had all the same weapons for all of this, like all of the same stats for the weapons on both sides. So you would have like a generic pistol for one side and a generic pistol for the other. They both had the same statistics, but they would name them as different guns so that you felt like you're playing against the Allies or the Axis. Um, but what actually happened was that they had different sound effects in different weapon models. And what happened was that one gun was really bassy and low and and the other one sounded sort of like um and and so people would discuss how much better the one that was bassy and loud and felt like you were shooting a really like meaty gun. They realized like it's so much better than the other gun from the other team. Like you guys have to balance this. And so what they did is that they changed the gun on the other side. They made it deeper and more impactful. And the players were like, "Yeah, that's great. We love it." I think that might have happened in playtesting, because shipping a game back then you had to make all those changes beforehand. But still, a really interesting story. I should find that. I think there's a little mini documentary on it. I'm going to talk about some of the really good game design channels that you guys should be watching because there's some really awesome ones out there. Um, so, okay, so about simplicity, feature creep is deadly. It can kill any project, no matter how much money you put behind it, right? Star Citizen, um, Half-Life 3. Uh, if so, feature creep is where you say you make a game and you're like, oh, this is great, everything's going so well. Let's add a crafting system. Oh, that would be so much fun. Oh, what if since you have a crafting system, you could sell your really well crafted items online with other players. And it's like, oh, well, okay, now we have to add some networking to it. What if you could play games with other people and fight with them? Now you have an even larger, it just keeps billowing and billowing. And I think that there's once you've sort of worked with the prototype enough, you should really set those limits early so you don't fall into future creep. It's very easy to do when things are going well, and suddenly they aren't, and you're wondering why. Um, so okay, so when I say simplicity, I think what I really mean is elegance, right? Elegance doesn't mean lack of complexity. It's a holistic and readable way to approach complexity. Um, you you could have a complex software um, like Google Drive, right? Which is distributed through thousands of servers across the world. But when you go to Google Drive, you just see a blank screen and you can create a document and you can upload your files and they're always there when you go back to it, and you don't see any of that stuff behind the scenes. That's the sort of elegance that you're looking for. You want the system to work smoothly, but you want it to be complex behind the scenes because that's what gives it that quality and polished feel to it. Um, it's sort of a hard thing to convey. Um, I think, uh, I mean, I think people in software probably sort of understand what I'm going at here with the elegance versus complexity argument. Um, but you make your game approachable, make it feel like you're using it, not that you're trying to figure it out, by flipping through a manual or a long tutorial screen. Um, Another thing that you should do when you're designing is work with game feel, or some people call it juice. It's a very new term in game development, but it's everywhere and it makes your game so much better. So game feel. What is game feel? Um, Game feel makes even the smallest interactions feel more rewarding. Um, so add little sounds, animations, screen shake to reward the player. Now I could explain all of game feel if people really wanted to know about it, but there are some great talks on the topic. I will uh I had the link ready, but it's gone. So um I'll here we go. I'll paste that into the chat. Um so so just a little, if you don't feel like watching it, I'll give just a tiny bit of outline. So in that video, these guys make a simple sort of Pong game. I don't remember what this specific game is called, but it's where you have sort of a Pong paddle at the bottom, and you're trying to hit this ball that's bouncing off of it, and it's hitting these squares and they're disappearing when they get hit. You're supposed to, break all of the squares. Breakout, yes, classic. So they make a clone of Breakout, and it feels very stiff and boring. And what they do is they add all these small things that happen when you do anything. So when a block breaks, it will sort of do a little fadeaway animation. It'll go like and sort of disappear slowly. And then they add sound effects. Sound effects are huge in making a game feel like it's a video game and making it especially like well-designed sound effects, can go so far in making a game feel professional and polished. It's a big deal, and they add this little like thing where when the paddle gets hit with the ball, it goes like burp. Um, which it doesn't seem like much, but when it adds up, it just gives the game so much more impact. When it hits a block, the screen sort of shakes a little bit, so like it feels like a brick just got smashed or something. Um, they go into it actually when we invited Chad Pennings, who made Mage Quit. He was also a Calvin grad to talk at Calvin Hacks, which by the way, you guys should go to the new one. It's I know it's happening in the next month or so. I was wearing my shirt that I got at Calvin Hacks. You get really cool shirts from MLH. Um, but he actually talked about game feel as well. And I need to make sure that that is posted on the Calvin Hacks Facebook account because it's a great. I say he did it better than they did about game feel. Um, it's a great game design talk that's way cooler and better than mine. Um, so um, yeah, let me. Yes, Mage Quit. You guys should check out Mage Quit. It's a multiplayer game. It's sort of like Smash Bros. Except top down. So you knock people off of little islands. Um, so my third design advice is iterate as much as possible in the prototype phase. All right. Um, Prototyping, it can be so hard to not go, oh, what is this gonna look like? Maybe if I add, a character model or like something, um, you start to get excited about what the game is gonna look like at the end, and but you like if you're when you're making a game, try and stay in that block phase where everything is just placeholder sounds, placeholder models. And work with these basic things, but work a lot on the logic and programming of it if you can, and try and iterate as much as possible. Keep trying different ideas. Make the code really modular so you can tear it out and put different stuff in it. Add things really fast, because I think experimentation is really the way to get a game that's really good. There's we go into so one of my favorite game design channels is called Game Maker's Toolkit. Um, he makes these little game development documentaries, and um, he talks about games that design themselves, people who were making a game and then added something they didn't think was going to work in the game, but then realized that that was so fun or interesting that they built the whole game around it. Um, there's like a game, I forgot what it's called, um, where you're like this guy who's running around in this room, and there are people shooting at you, and you're a gorilla, and you have to, in order to take them down, you actually have to grab one of your enemies and throw them at the other enemy. And the guy who made it, it was supposed to be, oh, Ape Out. That's what it's called. Ape Out is a game. Yes, so you're a gorilla or an ape, I guess. And you have to grab people and sort of do a little bowling with them. The game started off as a typical top-down shooter game where you were shooting enemies. And so the game developer he was just messing around with what he could do, and he made it so that you could grab enemies and sort of push them aside. And then he made it so that if you threw the enemy into another enemy, that it would get like, it would hurt them. And he thought this is like way funner than actually shooting them. So he made the character a gorilla. He took out the guns you could shoot, and you could only grapple people. So it, it's incredible. Yeah, I should actually do that right now. Games that design themselves, huge recommendation. One of my favorite ones from GMTK. So yeah, I think experimentation is a really great part of game development. There it is. I put it in the chat. And so I just, oh, apparently the music is tied to the gameplay in 8-Bit, which is cool. That's fun. So I think I don't want to scare people away when I talk about things like, keeping scope down, it's going to take longer than you think. Game development is super hard, right? But it's rewarding. At least if you really like it. Like if game development is for you, finishing something and playing it and being like, I made this. I'm a very creative. I like creative activities, so that's very satisfying to me. And I think that game development, it has just about every type of media you could think of like baked into it, and sometimes you can't even do without them, right? Um, and so it feels like the most like difficult but rewarding achievement you could do, right? To marry all these elements together. So I want you guys to, if you are interested in game development, don't be intimidated. It's still really fun. Um, but I should do something to demonstrate this. I was on the game development subreddit the other day, which is a very nice sometimes a very nice way to learn about what other game developers are up to and what they're talking about. But I'm gonna type in a Steam. Let's see. So here's a Steam page that I put into the chat. Um, it's a game called Bunny Park. It's very small. There are these bunnies, and you feed them, and you make a little environment for them. It's definitely not groundbreaking, but the guy who made this posted, and he said, I know, everyone's trying to make the game that they dreamt of. I made this little game. Uh, it's not groundbreaking, but I love telling people about it. I love showing people the game that I made. I made it in a month. He made it in a month. Which, clearly he's an experienced developer that he could do something sort of this polished in a month, but still, like, and he's made $30,000 off of it so far. So like it's not like, even if you want, like, it's game development can be whatever you want it to be. Like if you want to um if you want to sell it to people and sort of use it as a secondary source of income, yeah, you can. If you want to make it like a way to express yourself as an art form, you can do that. You don't even have to finish the games. Like, I talk a lot about finishing games. You don't have to. It's just a good way to improve. Um, I sometimes I don't know why I make games. Sometimes it's kind of torturous. Like, I'll be like, oh man, gotta work on this level that I'm not too crazy about, but it's sort of relevant to the plot. But I don't know. There's something magical about it to me. I don't know if not everyone feels that way, but I love it. So let me share my screen a minute, and I will show you guys some of the things I've worked on. Um, let's see here. And then maybe I'll just do some like discussions or questions or whatever. Let's see, share content. Okay. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
All right, so this is the one I'm working on right now. I released a sort of portion of it recently to make sure that it ran on people's computers, and there was more interest than I thought in it, so I got a decent amount of purchases. So Another thing that I want to talk about in terms of like games and passion is make stuff that you're passionate about and make it about your interests. So, I'm sort of a part-time sadist in that I love to scare people. I love to spook them. Um, and so I wanted to make a horror game. Uh, so this is Eddie Moyapolis. This is just the store page, you know. But I thought, you know, all these there's something sort of weirdly decentralized about buildings in the Midwest. Like they're always in the middle of a field, and a lot of the shopping sort of commercial areas are super dead because of the Great Recession, because of the way malls are developed and forgotten about. Um, and so I thought this would be really kind of scary environment to do. So I also there's this sort of idea of liminal spaces, which is sort of a um, uh, like sort of something that people are interested about online. So I ended up having like 2,000 followers on Twitter, and I've already made $1,500 from this game, which is insane because I'm not even finished with it yet. Um, but yeah, so I was interested in those kind of things. So I made a game about my personal experience, about places that I feel like I've been. Um, some other things that we were talking about procedural generation. Um, uh, So here's this is the game that made me realize I gotta focus my scope, right? It's very big, and I never would have finished it, but it was fun while I was working on it. So this is the procedural city generator that I was making a game around. Basically, it draws the outlines of the city. Um, so it uses like geometric um, division algorithm to set out the layout of the streets, and then it uses the outlines to make the building shapes. And so they can be really, really big because, you know, I don't have to design them myself, just the program has to design the cities. So I thought, you know, if I make the computer do all the work for me, then, you know, it could be easier. But the truth is, you just have more variables that can go really, really wrong. Um, but it was, oh man, someday I will come back to this project and I will try and finish it. You know, that's kind of talk though. I don't know, but like I had so much fun with it. Here, these are some videos of it like generating. Um, like so they generate in real time. Um, uh, like in a few seconds, it'll generate these entire cities. Um, Here's what it looks like. I added like a Spider-Man grappling hook kind of thing to it. Can you guys see the full screen?
Yep.
So, you know, you could get from one side of the city to the other really fast. Um, yeah, I love the game Titanfall 2. So, like I said, you know, borrowing elements from other games, I used a lot of the Titanfall 2 controls for this game. I thought that the grappling hook was not it was such a cool feature and it wasn't even in the story mode, so I took it upon myself to try something. This was actually the old city generator before I rewrote the entire thing. I actually finished it for my AI project senior year. I got a degree in computer science from Calvin University. Um, so yeah, there's this another thing in game development is to play to your strengths. So, and play to your interests. I love urban design. I love cities, and I wanted to like explore those ideas. Um, and let's see, can I exit screen share? I feel like my grandma. Okay, you might just see that for now on. Oh, stop sharing. So, but play to your strengths. I don't make music, so I found someone who was willing to make music for Minneapolis. Um, I um, I'm very intrigued, and um, I put a lot of effort into CGI and computer generated imagery. So my games are going to be really visually heavy, right? Well, thanks, Nathaniel or Nate, for putting. That's sort of the link to some of the environments that I made for Minneapolis. Um, and like using your strengths and your knowledge to even just take shortcuts, right? Like I made a horror game because I like scaring people, but also like you don't necessarily need people or animated characters or like many voice actors for a horror game because uh, having somebody alone makes it scarier. So it's all about like finding the ways you can take little shortcuts um, and improve in the ways that you know how you can improve. Um, so yeah, uh, I want to do this talk because I love game development. I think I'm not always the best authority to give like good advice for it, but a lot of the advice that I've talked about today are advice that I've heard from other places. So Game Maker's Toolkit, of which I sent the games that design themselves, great game design resource. There is if you want to learn more about game development as a career, um, there is a channel called NoClip. NoClip is about large video game projects and how the thought that goes into them and the technology and the people that create them. I'm putting that in the chat as well. See, Game Maker's Toolkit. Game Maker's Toolkit does a annual game jam, and I encourage you guys to try that out. I think those are really great starting points for getting into game design and the philosophy of game design. So yeah, if anyone wants to ask questions or just discuss making games or some of the things that I've worked on, go for it.
I've got a quick question. Have you ever done video game modding?
I did. That was actually a sort of part of my origin story. I should not say origin story because I'm not a superhero in any sense of the word. But I used to make mods for City Skylines. It's like SimCity, but is actually good in 2020. I shouldn't say that. City Skylines is what the new cities SimCity should have been.
Yeah.
And so I made buildings for it that actually taught me a lot about making the geometry for buildings, which I used later on for the city generator. I don't think I modded anything else besides just installing them from other people. But it's a great activity. Yes, that should be. If you are interested into the higher level technology of games and how they work and how they implement things, modding is a great place to start. Minecraft is an awesome modding community, and I'm sure all of you know Java. Awesome place to start modding. What are some new games that have come out that have good modding support? I really don't know. But yes, it's a fun thing to do. I encourage it.
Okay. I was going to ask the exact same question about making mods because it seems like, I don't know. It seems like Civilization 6 or whatever and Civ 6. And I don't know. There's been a couple other things where I thought, oh, you could make mods. You can download a mod, whatever. I wondered about. In fact, I thought about doing an interim where we would try to mod games.
That would be awesome. You should do that.
It would be, except we don't have interim anymore.
Yeah.
So, anyway, people might stick around for a May what is it called, intensive semester if we were doing game modding.
I would do that.
I would first have to learn something about it before doing it. It seems to me, it seems to me that a lot of these places where you have an opportunity to make mods is they were programming in Lua.
Yeah, I don't know why Lua. I think it has to do with the Source engine because the Source engine uses Lua for mods, and they have a lot of games in the Source engine.
Source engine?
Yes. So Source engine is like Source 2 engine. It's created by Valve, the people who made Steam, the publishers of Steam. They made Half-Life 2 in Source. The Portal games are a Source mod.
Okay.
So that's a
Oh,
big, Lua is a big one.
what's the one that I was playing recently over Christmas break and whatever? Don't Starve. I think
I've heard
that's
of that.
moddable. Don't Starve Together. Don't Starve Shipwrecked. I think that's moddable, and I think it's Lua. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think those are even in Source, so it must be more common than I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, so from what I know, Gary's mod is like everyone's favorite mod because you can just really do anything in it. It's based off of Half-Life 2's engine. I think some of the if I had to say some of the best mod games, if you guys want to start up modding, Minecraft, hands down, if you're into that. Um, the Source engine has modding tools. Also, Counter-Strike has a great modding community for making maps and game modes. Things like that. City Skylines has a built-in mod system, so you can do it pretty easily. Skyrim has a huge modding community, but I don't think that the people who made Skyrim really care that much if they mod it or not. It's weird. Yeah. Oh, speaking of, okay, this is a weird tangent, but it's super entertaining. Speaking of users doing things that companies didn't intend to or want them to. So if anyone's ever played Grand Theft Auto Online, they know that the loading times are like huge, like crazy long. I mean, even for a game of its size, ridiculous. And it turns out some guy on yes, there's an article about it. Some guy in Hacker News just like went through the binary of it and reverse engineered the loading system, and he figured out there's a JSON file. It's like 10 megabytes or something, and it has all of every single item that you can buy in game. And for some reason, it does a linear search on it with some sort of C operation that probably shouldn't be a linear search in the first place. And so every time it wanted to load an item, which it loaded every item, it would go through the list, the entire JSON list to get it, which basically meant that the loading times were completely unnecessary. So some people actually calculated because the game, it's Grand Theft Auto. It's like, the AAA game, like one of the best-selling video games of all time. And people like try to figure out like how much time it's probably wasted of people's lives. So they did the math. Like if you like the average person loads online at least twice, and let's see, the loading time is averaged about 5 minutes. And they sold 140 million copies, which comes out to 2,663 years that have gone to people waiting in the loading screen and pretty much wasting most like a large chunk of their life waiting for Grand Theft Auto Online to load. So listen to your professors about algorithms. They will help you. Anyways, that's what I have to say about that.
So I have a couple of questions,
Mhm.
Not related to modding, but
Mhm.
first of all, Andrew, great talk.
Thank
That's
you.
excellent.
Oh,
yeah, of
hi,
course.
Aaron. Sorry, I didn't see who was talking. It's been a
No,
while.
totally okay. It's been a while. Yeah. So, well, first of all, I was wondering how you actually pronounce your game.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was talking about this before this stuff.
Yeah.
It's called Anemoyapolis.
Okay. I don't think I'll be able to.
Yeah.
Do that.
No, there's a part in the game when you walk up to the billboard and you have a prompt to like look at it and talk, and the character's like trying to pronounce it. He's like says Animeapolis. It really doesn't matter that much. I
Okay,
just wanted to use the word Animoya, and
I
Apples
see.
is like such a Midwest town name.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to do it justice. Well,
Uh-huh.
I
It's based off Animoya, so it's a term
okay.
for um uh uh the term Animoya means when you have nostalgia for a time you've never known.
Oh, that's pretty deep.
Yeah. I saw it in a YouTube video somewhere.
Okay. I don't recognize any of the places, and I should. I should. So, are there any hints for me? I haven't downloaded the game, but just from the well, the $6 paywall is kind of
Oh yeah.
preventing me. But
Uh, I think I'll try and I might do a free demo eventually on Steam, but I haven't even released the full game yet.
oh, awesome. Okay.
No, yeah. So um, none of them are. Some of them are real places for pictures that I found online. So actually, a lot of my game is inspired from the subreddit called Liminal Spaces. It's it's where people share pictures that make that feel weird and transitional, like when you were a kid at a motel at midnight, or
Mm.
being in an empty airport, or um, being like at an old water park. These are like some people get it, like some people like, oh yeah, like I sort of know that feeling. Yes, that there's the link to
Mhm.
it. One of my posts is near the top about my game. There's it's um but actually there are places in Grand Rapids that make me feel that way. I mean, obviously the schools that I've been to or attended, but also like um uh North or Center Point Mall. Um, I think it's called Center Point. It's right by Calvin, and it used to have an indoor area, and nobody ever went through it. It was like a ghost town. That very,
Mhm.
very nostalgic. Um, there was a place called the Mac, which is it was like YMCA, and it's near. It was right where Fresh Time is now, and it was a giant gym, and nobody used it for some reason.
Forgot
Uh,
about that.
yeah, and so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
based some of the swimming pool areas off of that place. But I think everyone's sort of experienced this sort of liminal anemoia somewhere in their life.
I see. That actually helps. I now know. I was wondering if one of the photos was or screen grabs was from next to like the Secretary of State along 28th Street, not at not at the other location you're just talking about, but
Oh,
further in Wyoming actually.
I don't think I've been there. Um,
It's got that vibe, so you should check
so
it out.
okay, yeah, I will.
Totally.
I'll do
Okay.
that.
Oh yeah. Yep.
The Secretary of State on 28th Street.
Out in Wyoming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yep. And the only other thing I wanted to comment on was I couldn't agree more with what you're saying about software development being very difficult to gauge how long it's going to take.
Yes. Yes.
But I thought it was very insightful hearing you say like add in the component of artwork and now try to make estimates. So
Yeah,
that was very
it's
insightful.
borderline impossible. I never get mad
Yeah.
when games are delayed because I know. Well, I get mad if they make it sound like there's no way it's gonna get delayed and then they get delayed. Not naming any names, Cyberpunk. I'm sorry. I'm looking up this Secretary of State.
It's not specifically the Secretary of State. It's just like,
It's like
everything
the area around it. See, I
around
actually.
it, yeah.
So my job, which I did the last day of today because I start my new job on Monday, was that I delivered mail in areas in Kentwood, which is also what sort of inspired it. Huh. Okay, I can't find it right now, but I'll look. I might visit. Who knows?
Actually, yes, that was my last question. What will you be doing with your new job on Monday? It's
Yeah,
exciting.
I'm a 3D generalist there. It's funny. I did programming for like seriously in school, and I did 3D art for fun. Now I'll be probably programming for fun and doing 3D art for a job. I'll be a 3D generalist. So actually, I was really gunning for a software development degree, but it turns out that if you don't specialize, I mean, for me at least, I've found that not specializing in mobile or web can really kind of get you in a place where it's hard to market yourself. And I think I'm much better at in-person interviews, which I know are, bad idea right now. Um, so yeah, I'm really excited. I think 3D art is such an interesting place because it's such an intersection between art and technology. Um, I probably won't be doing much programming there, but they said that they intend to do more VR and AR things, and that I could help them consult them on that. So I'm happy.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
Let me
Oh, it's called
know
Think.
more later. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was it called?
It's called Think Chromatic.
Think
It's in
Chromatic.
Comstock.
Okay. Okay. That's really cool. I'd love to see your VR applications a year out from now. Sounds
Yeah,
awesome.
who knows? I tried not to define like specifically where I wanted to go in tech because you never know what kind of technology is going to pop up that you can work with.
I have a quick comment on the overhead of like art design and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons why I really like Minecraft modding is because that is like the easiest type of art design you could ever ask for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's no shame in programmer art when it's needed. Um, I think as long as you can make the game somewhat presentable. Minecraft's the perfect example of art direction could be almost non-existent, and you could still be very successful, right? It's a very mechanic-oriented game. I tend to focus on art focus things because I am in the sort of the art department now, but I think that making really interesting systems, and I could also talk a lot about this, but making games with systems um, it can be difficult, but I think that it makes the game better in a lot of ways. By systems, I mean like things that happen with or without the users doing or interacting with it that make the game world more believable. So there's a great genre of games called realistic sim. No, what am I saying? Not realistic sims. Um, oh man. Okay, so like game, they're games like Deus Ex. Have you ever heard of that? Um, it's uh, it's a game where you are put in a place and you have to do these certain quests, but around you things happen, and what you do influences the world around you, things ways you don't realize. There's a great talk by some Ubisoft employees about making Watch Dogs 2 and about having users or having non-player characters interact with each other in ways that even the developers didn't know or realize. Dwarf Fortress is a great it was a great game about systems that are interacting with each other. It's also if we're talking about art and making art, uh, and programmers making games that don't have art or have very minimal art. There's a game called Dwarf Fortress. I think it's still free, and it's ASCII or it's text art. So the person who made it focused all of the development on making the game emergent and always changing and relying on interesting complex systems. It's just that all your dwarfs look like little asterisks or whatever. Immersive sim, that's the game type. Immersive sim. I think that people should be making more immersive sims. That's my dwarfs. Dwarfs. Oh, right, Dwarf Fortress. It is a beautiful game, in a way. Yeah, and if anyone wants to put a question in the text box so they don't feel like turning on their mic, I totally understand. Thanks for coming, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you for giving the talk. It's very excellent.
Yeah.
I'll see you around somewhere.
Bye.
Maybe in Comstock Park now.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah. At this point, it's been over an hour. So, Aaron or Andrew, if you would like to keep answering questions, you're free to do that. But I don't want to keep you the whole night. Regardless, thank you for a very cool talk. That was pretty great.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm glad you guys stuck with me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna go and give my girlfriend a proper hello. So I think I probably will sign off unless anyone else has any other comments or questions.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming, and you should go to the next Calvin Hex. I helped start it, and it will never die.
This is true. Everyone needs to go to Calvin Hex.
Next weekend.
Yes. Oh, holy cow, next weekend. All right.
Am I wrong about that? I think it is.
Week from today.
Yep.
Sounds right.
I think technically I can still go because I'm 1 year since graduation.
Oh.
But I would feel weird. I don't know. Hello, fellow kids. I'm really not that much more adult than anyone else. All right. Thanks for coming. I'm gonna sign off for real this time. You should check out the links though. I hope they stay even after the video's done.
I'll put them on our website.
Okay, cool. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Andrew. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.